Hi everybody, my name's Erin and welcome to my beautiful unschool life. Today I'm going to give you an honest tour of my tiny house. It's not to say that my previous tour wasn't honest. I was just really focusing on the positives, the things that I'm proud of, what I love about my tiny house. And I do love my tiny house, don't get me wrong. But I built it myself with almost no building experience. I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't really know what I'm doing, but I've been living in it for 2 years, so I have a much better idea about what I should have done differently and what I would like to do going forward. So, welcome to an honest tour of my tiny house. So the first problem with my tiny house is visible immediately. There's no siding on the tiny house, there's no solar panels on the tiny house, and there's no rainwater collection system on my tiny house. There's no siding just because I just haven't gotten around to it. We have a bunch of secondhand siding that we're going to put onto it, but it's a big job and it's been doing just fine without siding. It's really only an aesthetic thing as far as I'm concerned at this point. There's no rainwater collection system because I haven't quite figured out how to handle this particular roof arrangement. If I put a gutter here, sorry, there's a cat fight happening right now. Can you guys stop just yelling at each other when I'm filming? It's really ridiculous. So there's Emma. I don't even see Smudge. Oh, there's Smudge over there. There's Cole coming in, and they're all just gonna yell at each other. Even though this is Emma's side of the property, Smudge and Cole will not leave her alone. They just cannot let her exist in this environment. It's extremely frustrating. The complication with putting the rainwater collection system on the house is I've got an IBC tote inside my greenhouse. The idea is that the greenhouse would theoretically prevent it from freezing. I don't think it does. I'm pretty sure the water in there is frozen right now. This is my first winter with the greenhouse and my first winter with the IBC totes in there, and it's too cold in there. I'm working on a plan. I'm not sure what to do about that. So the idea is that all of the roof edges would have troughs that would all feed into the IBC totes inside the greenhouse. But of course, once I put a trough on this part of the roof right here, there's no way to get it to there. Unless maybe if I ever the plan is to build a porch here, because obviously this door can't be used right now because there's no porch on it. Maybe if I built a porch there, I could run the gutter under the porch and into the IBC tote, but then it would be closer to ground level, and the IBC totes are like 4 feet. The top is 4 feet off the ground. I'd need a water filtration system to clean all the bird poo and leaf litter out of the water. So I haven't quite wrapped my head around how to do that yet. So at this point in time, I am still lugging jugs of water in and out of the house every few days. The solar panels are not on the house yet because my electrical system doesn't work. I think I can walk and talk about this one. So one of my biggest regrets, and I addressed this problem when I filmed me building the house, because I don't know what I'm doing, because I was doing something completely out of my comfort zone, out of my familiar zone, out of my skill zone. It was really easy for me to pick a person who knew about something and just do exactly what they said and trust exactly what they said without doing any of my own research. And that is what I did when it came to my electrical system. The man that I was living with said he knew how to do electrical. He taught me how to wire my own house. I wired it myself. Before I put the walls up, I asked him to check it. He did a very cursory check. He said, yep, it's all good, and I put the walls on. And then after our relationship fell apart, and Dawn came into the picture, and Dawn recommended that I try backfeeding electricity into the house. And so what backfeeding means is you create an extension cord that has a male part on both ends. You plug the male part into a plug in the house, one male end into the plug in the house, and another male end we plugged in these exterior sockets here. And in theory, what that should have done is run electricity into my house. And it did work for about 3 seconds, and then the breaker flipped in his house. So we turned off all the breakers in my house and did it again, and it still flipped the breaker in his house. And that's where I'm stuck. I haven't figured out how to narrow down where the mistake is, because there's only 3 circuits in my house. In theory, we should be able to turn off all the circuits and turn them on one at a time and see which one breaks the switch, but it doesn't work like that. All 3 circuits turned off still breaks the switch. So that's where I'm stuck, because I don't know anything more about electricity. No certified electrician will come and look at my house because they don't want to get sued if it burns down. Understandable. My house is not to code, but the thing is, a tiny house on wheels where I live does not need to be to code. It is considered a trailer, a homemade trailer, and there's no rules, there are no regulations, there's no code for a homemade trailer, which is nice. It meant I could do things the way that made sense to me rather than to code. Because, for instance, my stairs are never going to be to code. I don't have enough space to build stairs that are to code. They're halfway between stairs and a ladder, and I love them. They're perfect. They're not very safe. I'm 100% willing to admit that they're not very safe, but life's not safe. Sometimes we take risks, and that's sort of my approach to things. So that means that I can't get an electrician to come and look at my house because they don't want to get in trouble. So I'm left with people who know about electrical work, and and I know a couple of people, but they're just busy. They just haven't come to look. So there's no point in putting my solar panels up because there's nothing to connect them to, and it would just be a waste. But that means that I have a $10,000 solar power system sitting in Don's shed for almost 3 years now, just degrading. And it's entirely possible that the batteries won't even work anymore by the time I set them up. So that's a big mistake. I should have done the research myself and learned how to do the electrical work myself instead of just trusting someone to make sure that it was all right. I should have done it myself instead of just trusting him. So now we are around the back of my house, and you get to see another one of the problems with my house is this door. Because my loft sits above this door, I couldn't have a full height door. It needed to be short. And I didn't want to just cut the bottom of my door off. I wanted this flat part at the bottom. I didn't want the door to end with these ripples. So I cut a chunk out of the middle. And initially I had them hinged separately and latched with these little latches. So it was almost like a really weird backwards Dutch door. And that worked really well for a little while. But the problem is, whenever there's a big, strong wind from the west, this door flies open and the bottom of the door hits my makeshift stairs here. And it slowly, time after time, has been damaging the door, and it ruined the hinges. So ultimately, we had to give up on the double Dutch door, and we just patched it together with a piece of wood. And, you know, it works. It does the job, but it needs to be replaced. And when I built the door, I knew it was going to need to be replaced. It's kind of actually lasted longer than I thought it would, but it's a problem. Like, we can't close it unless we slam it. The wind catches it really badly. So what we would really like to do is, instead of these little stairs, this is supposed to be a covered porch. And this covered porch is supposed to store my fridge and my freezer. And the reason my fridge and the freezer are supposed to be out here is because in the winter I won't make enough solar power in order to keep the fridge and the freezer cold inside my house. And also, I don't have enough room inside my house. So the plan is to keep them on the back porch. In the summer, I'll have loads of solar power and I'll be able to run the fridge and freezer. But for now, I don't have a fridge or a freezer because I don't have solar power. Anytime I need to keep something in the fridge or the freezer, it's in Dawn's house. And I have to walk, I don't know, how far would you say that is? 500 meters. to get anything that I need in the fridge and freezer. I do keep condiments inside my house in a cooler, and I have ice packs that I swap over every single day. Right now, actually, my ice pack is here because it's minus 15 degrees out, so I don't need to take it into Dawn's freezer. I can just leave it here. But when the weather gets warmer again, as soon as it goes above freezing, I am bringing an ice pack from Dawn's house every single morning and swapping it out to keep my condiments cold. So if I ever get a porch built, and if I ever get my solar panels on, then I'll be able to have a fridge and freezer, and then I will be able to replace this door because I won't have to worry about it getting broken again. When we do replace this door, we're thinking of building a door from scratch, and I do want a window in it because this is the only window I have on the north side of my house. So I do want a window in it. I would like to have a double glazed window, and I would like to have a window that opens because in the summer, the air circulation in my house is a serious concern. So if I could have a window that opens there, that would give me a bit of air circulation to the north, because oftentimes there's a nice breeze coming off of the lake. The lake is sort of north and west from here. Okay. Another thing that is imperfect about my house is my greenhouse. So the original plan was to put a greenhouse across the entire front. As I lived in the house and got a feel for how hot it is in there in the summer and how poor the air circulation is, I rethought that, and I felt like maybe we should just start with part of the house. So 1/3 of my house has this greenhouse. We just built this greenhouse in the spring, and so this is my first winter with the greenhouse. So inside the greenhouse, I have this big IBC tote that I have painted black, and the hope was that the black paint would attract the sunlight and it would keep the water warm enough that it would heat the greenhouse. But let's have a feel. Looks like a possum or a raccoon has been climbing up on this. I know Cole goes up here sometimes, so that could be his footprints, but anyways, let's see. Yeah, it's frozen. So there is water in here right now, but it is not keeping the greenhouse warm. There is still cold breeze coming in my window. So this window over here is where my electrical cord comes in. So it's always open, just a tiny crack. And there is still a cold breeze coming in through that window, even with this greenhouse on here. And this greenhouse has a double layer of plastic in it. So I don't really know what more I could do to warm it up in here. Dawn did get given a small wood stove. So there's always the possibility of putting a small wood stove in here. But as you can see, it's tight. There's not a lot of space in this greenhouse. So I'm not really sure how that would even be possible. So it's not a place where I can keep plants in the winter. Everything in here is dead. It's also very humid in here, just from the ground, moisture, that's it. And it doesn't get a lot of sunlight. As soon as there's any amount of snow, this roof gets snow on it and doesn't let the sunlight in. So it's not in any way whatsoever what I was hoping it would be. So I'm glad that I only built it small. It does find in the spring, I just put a little electric heater in here, and I have a bunch of these shelves, and they have an extra layer of plastic that goes over them, and then I can put the seed starting mats and the lights in them, and they're warm enough. They do fine. It's fine for doing my seedlings in the spring, but what I really, really, really want is to be able to grow in here all year round. So some definite back to the drawing board about that. Now, are you coming, Cole? So another thought that Dawn has, and I'm not entirely sure about it, is he thinks that we should build out the whole way, extend the greenhouse across the entire front, and that we should take my wood stove out of my house and put it actually in the greenhouse. Keep those doors open all the time, and the heat rising from the wood stove would still heat my house, which I suppose it would do. The thought was that if the wood stove was in the house, we could open the doors and it would heat the greenhouse, but it just doesn't work that way. The heat just goes up. The greenhouse heats my house in the summer. The house does not heat the greenhouse in the winter. It just doesn't work that way. So that's an idea that Dawn has been toying with. I'm not really sure about that. I don't really, it's just too hot in the summer to have all these doors closed off. It's just too hot in the summer. And it would also limit my light. The reason my house has so many windows is because I desperately need sunlight. It keeps me from going crazy. It keeps me from going crazier than I already am. Let's just put it that way. So if we were to block all of these windows off, I don't know how I would survive the winter because I wouldn't get enough sunlight. And if we were to block all these windows off, I don't know how I'd survive the summer because there wouldn't be enough air circulation. We can take the poly off the walls in the summer, and that is what I did. I did take the poly off of those walls in the summer, but it's kind of a pain in the butt, and it's another thing to add to the to-do list. So we're not really sure what to do. We're working through our options. Let's just put it that way. We're still trying to figure out what the deal is with that. All right, let's go inside the house. So I would say the number one mistake that I made in building this house is that I built the studs at 24 inches. It makes sense in a tiny house on wheels to build your studs at 24 inches because weight is a concern, and putting the studs on 24 inches means I've got less studs, which means I have less weight. The problem is when it comes to the interior, now I have very few studs to attach things to. So the first example is my wood stove gets very hot. The hot air rises, and because I don't have any electricity, my ceiling fan doesn't work. Hot air rises and goes straight into my bedroom. So we decided to put a curtain up to block the hot air from going into my bedroom. Unfortunately, there is no stud here. The nearest stud is here. So we had to mount the curtain to the stud, which means that's probably an 18-inch gap between the edge of the curtain and the entrance to my loft. So that was the first real issue with the 24 on center studs. Here's another example over here. I wanted to mount a shelf in this spot here, but there are no studs in this spot. So I had to put a piece of 1x4 to connect to the studs and then mount the shelf to the 1x4s. So that is something to keep in mind if you're ever building a tiny house. 24-inch studs do save on weight, but it creates a real pain in the butt. Another thing that is a problem, I'm not ready to say it was a mistake or a regret because I absolutely love my stove. She's the centerpiece of the house. She's almost part of the family. She's absolutely beautiful. I use her for everything, but she is too big. My original thinking was I needed an oven. I like to bake bread. I like to make real meals. I needed a wood stove with a real oven. That's why I got this stove. Unfortunately, I can't get it hot enough for it to be used as an oven. I mean, for instance, my sourdough bread recipe, you have to have your oven at 500 degrees. I can't even get this oven to 300 degrees. It's just not practical, possible, or feasible. One reason that I like having a really big wood stove is that these two are on deck. These two pieces are going to go in the stove next. They can dry up here. They sit here for, 5-6 hours and they get drier and then they burn better in the burn box. If you put wet wood in the burn box, you get a lot of creosote. I clean my chimney 2 or 3 times a year. You don't need to clean your chimney that often, but I do because I live in a very small house and I have small children and I don't want it to be a dangerous environment for them. So just to be on the safe side, I clean out my creosote 2 or 3 times a year. Also, I do sometimes burn wet wood. I do sometimes burn cheap punky wood. We collect all the wood ourselves from the forest, so I burn whatever I've got. So oftentimes I'm producing a lot more creosote than I should be. I'm burning softwood, I'm burning hardwood, you know, it doesn't, I don't care. Anytime you burn wood that's a little bit damp, it's going to add more creosote. So I keep the wood here on the side of the stove. It means that I'm actually quite glad that my stove is too big because I have space to dry wood. So I'm not ready to say that I regret this great big wood stove because I use it. I use the whole thing. The only thing I don't use is the oven. But I am working on doing more slow cooking, treating the oven like a slow cooker. And if I master that, then maybe I'll be able to say that I'm using the whole wood stove and that it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It's just maybe something that a decision that you might not want to make. Even as it is right now, it's damped right down. My kettles aren't even boiling. You can hear them simmering, but they're not boiling. And the house right now is 24 degrees. And the humidity is like 17. So, and that's down here. Once you get up into the lofts, it's probably a good 5 degrees hotter. As I said before, the hope was that I would be able to open these double doors and have a greenhouse out there and the wood stove would heat the greenhouse. It's just not possible. The wood stove doesn't even heat the living room. When I sit over here, it is probably, well, I should put the thermometer over here is what I should do. It's very cool down here. Part of the reason it's cool down here is because the heat rises, and the other part is I put lots of windows in here, and they're all secondhand windows, so they're not very good quality, and I haven't put any sort of framing around the edges. So there's air leaking in through here. There's air leaking in through here because it's a secondhand window and it doesn't close properly. So it's always really chilly down here in the living room. At one point when I was designing my tiny house, I did come across some complaints from people saying having your bedroom in a loft is too hot. You should consider a reverse loft, which I think maybe would have been a really good idea. And I did play around with it. I can't remember why I ultimately decided not to. But a reverse loft would mean that my bedroom would be, the floor would have been here, and the living room would have been on top, and the bedroom would have been underneath. I think that could have been a really good idea because I like to be cold when I'm sleeping, so I would have been much colder. And I like to be warm when I'm sitting in the living room, and their living room would have been much warmer. So if you are considering building a tiny house, I'd recommend looking into that. It's not a bad idea. Oh, I know why. Slanted roofs. That was why I ultimately rejected the idea, because I needed slanted roofs for the solar panels, and it would really cut into the living room space to have such a steep slant, and I wouldn't have been able to have any windows in the living room if I'd put it on the top. So that is probably why I rejected the idea. The next thing that I'm not quite sure what to do or how to do it is the windows look terrible. You know, with this window here, it's just stud, the window tape, the spray foam, and the window frame. I'm not quite sure how to make this look nice. And I do have a lot of trim that, so my boyfriend Don, he's torn down a couple of old farmhouses and he's always thrifty. So he's brought home loads and loads and loads of this kind of trim. So I do have quite a bit of trim that I'm going to try and figure out how to put around my windows. And also you have a look up there where my beadboard meets the walls and the ceiling. There's lots of gaps that look very unsightly. So I would like to fix those. I did have a viewer suggest maybe using rope, and that's a kind of a cool idea, although rope is not cheap, whereas this stuff is free. So I'm still playing around with that. I haven't figured out what I want to do yet. But I'm hoping that if I were to get some sort of baseboard on and then put in some curtains, it wouldn't be so drafty, because it really is very drafty. The temperature zones in my house are just ridiculous. When you're in the bedrooms or in front of the stove, it's probably a good 10 degrees warmer than it is when you're in the living room or the kitchen, or the bathroom is the coldest room in the house. The bathroom is down there. And when I come down in here at night, like the hand washing water is like ice cold. There is a little window in here. It opens into the greenhouse. So you wouldn't think that it would be that cold, but it really is quite remarkable how small the house is and how much the temperature changes from one location to another, which is because I don't know what I'm doing and I built a house myself. I don't find the floor cold, which I'm really surprised at. I was expecting the floor to be much colder. Part of the reason I always wear slippers in the house because I have children and my floors are constantly dirty. So I have house shoes so I don't notice how dirty the floors are. But it also means I don't notice if the floors are cold. I only put a layer of fiberglass pink insulation and then 2-inch foam insulation. That's all that's in the floor. And to me, it's pretty good. I can't say I have a complaint about the floor. So I really need to seal around the windows. I also need to seal around this door. Last year, I put some foam in this gap, and it really did cut down on the cold breeze, but the foam stuck to the door and then I couldn't open it. So when springtime came and I opened the door, the foam ripped right off. But one of the worst things about living in this house is the flies and the ladybugs. They're really, I can't even explain to you how bad the fly situation is. I know a lot of people think they have a problem with flies. Times it by 10 and you've got my problem with flies. I'll put up a fly tape and within 10 minutes I'll have 100 dead flies on it. There was a day this past summer where I told Abby that I would give her a quarter for every 25 flies that she killed, and she made $3 in an hour. Part of the problem is, yeah, they can come in through the window cracks and the door cracks. I did put vapor barrier all around the house, so I don't know if they can get in through the walls, but they're getting in. Flies and ladybugs. The other part of the problem is I have a compost toilet. Not the fancy kind of compost toilet that's like $1,000. I have the really simple kind of compost toilet. It is 2 buckets, a bucket for pee and a bucket for poo. And when you poo, you need to get some wood shavings and bury your poo. If you don't bury your poo, the flies will lay their eggs in it, and within a day you have maggots, and within 3 days you have flies. And the problem with my situation is I have 2 children who are 10 and 8 years old, and 3 days a week they go to their father's, and I spend time at my boyfriend's house, and I'm not in here a lot, so I don't notice the maggots until I come home and there are 1,000 new flies in my house. Is that a regret? Not really, because I can't afford $1,000 compost toilet. I don't want an outhouse. I'm a woman who's had multiple children. I go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I don't want to go outside in the dead of winter to go to the bathroom. This toilet is exactly the toilet that is the right toilet for my life and my house. We just got to get the fly situation under control. When it does come time to figuring out what is wrong with my electrical system, I am very concerned because I built a junction box. So one circuit starts, so the circuits all start at the breaker box here. One of them goes under this floor, and in the corner there splits in 2 directions. One goes outside to the exterior plugs, and the other goes across here and up into the kids' loft. The junction box is behind the stove under the false floor. So if you see here, the wheel wells are here. And the way I solved the wheel well problem was I built a false floor so that I would have storage down here. And I'm really happy with this storage because it's quite cool. So I can keep potatoes and onions and things down there. It's almost like a root cellar, which is wild because it's right next to the wood stove. So it's extremely valuable space, and I'm very, very happy with that choice. But somewhere back in there, there's a junction box. And I really hope that that's not where the problem with my electrical system is, because it will be impossible to get to without serious destruction. I also want to show you. This is creosote. It dripped from my chimney. We had a really big melt and a really big rain right after I'd cleaned out my chimney. And I don't know what part of that combination did it, but my chimney started leaking from this gap right here, and it splattered everywhere. So I now have creosote splatters all over my floor and wall. The nice thing is it really smells like barbecue sauce. And I can't really complain having a house that smells like barbecue sauce. Not so bad. I'm just trying to think if I have any other regrets. I don't think I do. I have lots of projects still. There's a lot to be done on this house. The tour that I did was actually filmed 1.5 years ago, and I've hardly done any work on the house since then. I put in a few shelves, that shelf, and this shelf here, which holds my daughter's toaster oven and an induction burner and a toaster. And that means that the kids can cook for themselves a little bit. I really want my kids to be independent, and it's hard for them to be independent when we're cooking on a wood stove or on a barbecue. Both of those things are a little bit complicated and a little bit scary for the kids. So setting that up was a really good option. I'm really glad I have it. It means, however, that I don't cook on the wood stove as often, because the truth about cooking on a wood stove is it's complicated. I will do an entire video about cooking on a wood stove, but it's unpredictable. Cooking on a wood stove changes based on the weather, the temperature, the humidity. It depends on the wood that you're burning, how dry it is, how old it is, what type of wood it is. You can cook the exact same thing 4 days in a row, and it's a completely different experience every single time. So now that I have the option of an easy solution, I use it a lot more than I thought I would, because I wasn't being honest with myself. But again, it is what it is. It's not really a regret. It's just something to be aware of. We tend to gravitate towards whatever's easier. Projects. Besides the siding, the rainwater collection system, the solar panels, and getting the windows sealed a little bit better, pretty much everything else that I want to do is aesthetic. I want it to look pretty in here. I want there to be more plants. I want there to be more colors. I want something other than a plywood floor and a plywood kitchen counter. For the floor, I had originally thought I would buy some roll-out laminate flooring, like what I have in the bathroom. But I've recently been seriously considering maybe just painting it and painting a pretty pattern on it, because to put laminate flooring in when these cabinets have already been built, it means I have to either cut around the legs or remove everything, put the flooring in, and put everything back. And we did build this in a way that we can remove it, because we knew that we would have to put flooring in eventually. But I'm at the point now where I have so much on my plate, the thought of a project that big is just, it's a total deterrent. I could see myself painting it. I can't see myself removing the entire kitchen counter to put flooring down and then reinstalling the kitchen counter. So I think the floor will be painted. The kitchen counter, on the other hand, I'm really undecided about. I found some tiles that I really like. I would really love to give it like a really beautiful, bright, colorful, bohemian kind of feel. But again, I'm on wheels, and I don't actually know how much my house weighs. But I do know that every extra pound is a problem. We really should have weighed the house when we moved it, because we know someone just up the road who has a weigh station. We should have done that, but we didn't think about it until it was too late. We were too preoccupied with how terrifying it was to move my house. So there's a real worry about putting tile in because that is going to add extra weight. I mean, it's just a dinky little kitchen counter, so I can't imagine it would add a huge amount of weight, but it's something to be aware of. Oh, and one other thing. Banister for these stairs. These stairs that go to my bedroom, they're pretty treacherous. And my kids sleep in my bedroom because why would they sleep in their own bedroom? Don't be ridiculous. So every time they come in and out of here, I imagine them falling headfirst and crashing into the stove and dying. I'm not really a fear-based person, but it's a real concern. The kids do tend to be very careful because it is so obviously dangerous. They're not super reckless about it, but we've gotten away with it for over 2 years now. We've been able to get away with it. So we really should put that banister in. It's on the list. Okay, yeah, here we go. The living room is 15 degrees. 5 feet away from here, it's 27 degrees, and here it's 15 degrees. So that gives you a real sense of the inconsistency in the temperatures in my house. I have another thing. This couch. I wanted the couch to have storage, so you can open these up, and there's all sorts of tools in that one, and there's winter clothes in another one, and sewing supplies. All of my solar stuff that I'm not using is underneath me right now. I made these cushions myself. I like a really upright couch. I don't like those couches that you sit in and they suck you in and you can't get out again. I really like that this is kind of rigid and upright. But these cushions don't stay on. They're constantly falling off. And I don't really want to use Velcro because cat hair, kids make a mess. Velcro is just not practical. So I'm not really sure what to do about these cushions to get them to stay on my couch. So if you have any ideas for how to get my cushions to stay in place, I'll take them. This shelf here isn't always here. It's only here right now because I'm drying corn and I'm drying loofahs. I was also drying beans down here, but the cat has decided it makes a really good bed. And now I've got all my kids' art supplies are on the bottom shelf, and I don't even know, there's nowhere to put them. I don't know. I have enough storage if it's just me. But because I have kids, I have a fraction of the storage that I need. We have pared down their things to very, very little. We only have the stuff that they actually use, and that makes a really big difference. People keep trying to give us stuff because they know that we're poor. And you know, when you're poor, people are like, here, let me help you out. Here's a whole bunch of stuff for free. And it's lovely and it's wonderful, but I don't have anywhere to put it. So that's a thing to keep in mind. Something I did right is putting this wood storage right here. When I bring it in, it's usually quite wet. My house is very hot and very dry. The wood stove dries the wood, and the wood adds humidity to the air. If you are thinking of building a tiny house, the best advice I can give is, number one, build your house first in a design program. I use SketchUp. It's a total 3D software. You build every single 2x4, every single sheet of plywood. You build everything in the program, and then you can move it around and get a feel for how it works and how it looks and how it's laid out. I really saved myself a lot of mistakes by doing that. The next thing that I did right was I built the shell and then I moved in. And bit by bit, I made changes and I built things as I went, as I got a feel for what I needed. It actually turns out to be a good thing that I've been living in it unfinished, because I can get a feel for what's practical and what's not practical, what works for me and what doesn't work for me, what I need and what I don't need. So now that I've been living in it for 2 years, I have a much better sense of how to keep moving forward because I know what's working and what's not working. Don't trust anyone to tell you the right way to do it. Only you know the right way to do it. Only you know what your life is like and what your needs are and what works for you and what doesn't work for you. don't trust anyone else, because if they're giving you bad advice, you're the one that's going to be stuck living with the bad advice. Be ready for things to be difficult, and be ready for things to be messy, be ready for things to be chaotic. It's just how it is. So I think that's it. I love my house. I'm very proud of it. It is not perfect. I will do a video in a few weeks about what it's really like living in a tiny house, like a day in the life kind of thing. I'll make sure to film it on a day when my kids are here, because so far both of my tiny house tour videos, my kids weren't here and the house was actually clean. It makes a big difference. When you live in a tiny house, it gets messy very quickly. It also gets cleaned very quickly. So, you win some, you lose some. I love living in a tiny house. It's far from perfect. It's very difficult. It's fulfilling. I'm really proud of my house. I'm really proud of my life. If it's something that you think will work for you, then go for it. I knew that I could live in a small space because a few years ago, my kids and I lived in Uganda. And the house that we were living in, we just had one bedroom, one bathroom, and one kitchen living room. And that was it. And the kitchen didn't have a full oven. It just had a little, it didn't have an oven at all, actually. It just had a little 2-burner cooker and a toaster. And we did just fine. So I do recommend trying it out for a little while before you do it for real, so that you can have a sense of what you need and what you don't need, and what you want and what you don't want. But no matter what you do, you're going to make mistakes. That's just how it is. All right, well, that was my very honest tiny house tour. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a few things about what to do with your tiny house, or what not to do with your tiny house. Take care. Have a good one. I'll see you next time.